Ladies and gentlemen, there are very, very few advantages to being 75. And looking ahead of me, I can see about 60, 70 young proofs of that. But there is one advantage. It's called time. Not time to come, not a lot of that left, but time past. Time to have gone around the world several times. Times to have studied a lot of different systems, governmental, economic, judicial, to have assessed them, to try to work out which is better, which is worse, to have come to the view that on all three fronts the British system are the best in the world: parliamentary, jurisprudential, and economic. Time to have talked to a lot of people, listened to a lot of people, debated, to have formed opinions, to have tested them, to have read a lot. And if you add all that together, it comes to one single word, a little bit longer than time, it's experience. So without any patronization at all, particularly to the younger people, I'm going to try and pass on a little bit of the experience. If you are ever assailed in life with a whole array of different choices, and in a perfect world you'd prefer not actually have to make a choice, but this not being a perfect world, you have no option. A choice has simply got to be made, and there are lots of different alternatives. My recommendation would be, first of all, to analyze. Some of them will simply disqualify themselves. They're ruinously expensive, or they're not going to work. They're unfeasible. When it comes to Britain's membership now, going back to 1973, when Mr. Edward Heath got us in, to what we then thought and were told was only a common market. Going back to that, I would say that our position now is thus. There are three possible choices. The worst of all is where we presently are. Half in, half out. Constantly complaining, constantly objecting, constantly being overruled, constantly being outvoted, constantly capitulating and then pretending we didn't. And that is, in fact, an option that I believe only continues to our detriment. Now, I was never a great admirer of Sir Roy Jenkins. He was a Labour man, of course, you know that, you remember him perhaps. He tried to become leader of the party, failed, but he did become Britain's only ever president of the European Commission. And he was a passionate, and I do mean passionate, supporter of the EU in all its works, and an advocate of Britain's total and complete subsumation into the EU. Even he said that to be half in, half out was the worst of all possible options, and if we were faced with that and no other option, it would be better if we withdrew. That was Roy Jenkins. So I think we can, at this juncture, I hope we can, say that that option is, being the worst, the one we reject, to go on as we are, failing, and we are failing, taking many, many burdens, very few advantages, and that leaves us really two. Now, one of those is to cease sort of prevaricating on the borders of the European Union, not of Europe. We are on the geographically on the borders. We can do nothing about that, but on the borders of the project, the vision, the dream of what apparently the European Union is, and that is the complete unification of the continent into one large, influential, wealthy, powerful bloc, but governed centrally. We could go from where we are now to the top table, to sit with the core members, France and Germany, sometimes referred to as Franco-Germany, because inside the EU they are as one country. We could sit with them on the top table. We could wield enormous influence where we do not at the moment. We could be at the very heart of every decision that is made if we go that road. And it's a very tempting road. It's the road that's going to be put to you by For example, Britain's stronger in Europe, and that all the other various campaigners who will suggest that when the referendum comes, we should go that road. Certainly, Lord Heseltine takes that view, so does Mr. Clark takes that view. There are a number of others who think that that is the road we should go. And it's very, very tempting, save for one thing. Now, I really do actually prefer pragmatism to passion. I actually prefer facts to fiction, which is odd when you think how I make a living. Never mind. One of the facts that you will not be told is that if we wish really to become a full-fledged, full-on, no holds barred, 100%, at the very heart and centre of the EU members, there are 3, I think, concessions we have to make. You cannot be at the heart of the EU and refuse to join the Eurozone. So we're going to have to abolish the pound sterling and join the euro. 2, you cannot be at the heart of Europe and refuse to sign the Schengen Agreement. So we would have to abolish our borders, such as they are, residual at the moment, nevertheless, our borders still, and join Schengen in perpetuity. It hasn't come up yet, but it will. There's a third major concession we would have to make. It's called corpus juris, 2 Latin words, obviously, meaning the body of the law. It's been prepared, it's in the wings, it hasn't yet been proposed, but it will, because it must. And it is the unification of the criminal codes, the penal codes, in all the jurisprudences right across the continent. Now, for many countries, there will be some amendment to be made, but no revolution, because corpus juris is based on the Code Napoleon, as indeed are many of the jurisprudences right across the continent of Europe. But our law is based on English common law, and that goes back way before Bonaparte. It is based, for example, on certain pillars like habeas corpus, the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, trial by jury, as opposed to one judge and 2 lay assessors who do what they're told, and the presumption, of the guilt, that the doubt rather accrues, the benefit of the doubt accrues to the defense. Now, these are not in the Code Napoleon. They are therefore not in corpus juris. We would have to have a complete jurisprudential revolution to sign up to corpus juris, which will be coming. So here are 3 concessions we would have to make. And I suggest that you think very carefully whether even David Cameron will ever put to this country the abolition of the pound. I don't think he ever will, because if he did, he would be very speedily out of office, possibly even faster than the present Labour leader, which I'm being mischievous, sorry. I don't think he will ever put to us the abolition of our borders, and I don't believe that he will ever put to us the abolition of our legal code. So here is a gentleman who sits in Downing Street, who seems to be prepared to make some concessions, but he's demanding a few peripheral concessions from Europe, and they are only basically peripheral. Fundamental is the currency, the borders, and the law code. These are, as I said, not up for trade. But if they're not, then any question of moving to the heart and centre of the Europe will be denied to us. Even what he is asking at the moment, peripheral though they may be, do require, he says no, I know better, he's wrong, they do require treaty change, and treaty change by the laws of the EU can only be achieved with unanimity, which we are never, under any circumstances, going to get. The Czechs today, I think, or yesterday, said you must be joking. Therefore, one is left with, if you like, the other alternate. Well, of course, alternates are always other. And I mean, to accept a reality which is disagreeable, but nevertheless, I think possibly unavoidable. And it is like a marriage which isn't working. To say quite simply, if there are no children involved, and there are in this case no children, to say it is probably better for 2 mature adults to agree to be friends in neighbouring houses than constantly squabbling in one. We could, I believe should, negotiate in the friendliest possible manner an end to the present squabbling that goes on between this country and the constant complaining by this country. And say, look, we would like to be, will be your friends, your allies. We will collaborate on 1,000 different issues, but we do not wish to be subservient anymore to a government we did not elect and we do not admire. That is, of course, the government of Brussels. So I think when the campaign comes, you will be told many things. You will be, I'm afraid, offered many lies. But these, I suspect, you will not be told about. You will not be told that to move to the heart and centre of Europe will require the abolition of the pound. If you put that to a proselytizer, he will begin to study his fingertips or the cracks in the ceiling, because it's unanswerable. As to outside the EU, we will be told many things, scary things, that outside lies only a future of isolation, of irrelevance, indeed of diminishing prosperity, possibly even of poverty. Frankly, rubbish. There are huge opportunities outside the EU. We do not live any longer in a world of regionalization. We live in one of globalization. It is as easy to talk to someone in Singapore today and do business with him as it is to talk to and do business with someone in Slovenia. Probably easier. He speaks our language, and Singapore has exactly the same history, if you like, and methods and trading customs and law customs as we do. There is the North Atlantic free trade area, which could be the these now called the North American free trade area, could so easily become the North Atlantic free trade area. It's bigger and richer than the EU. There is the combined Commonwealth, which we turned our back on in 1973 at the behest of Mr. Heath, who loathed it. Back then, and I remember them well, the Commonwealth was largely very, very poor ex-colonies. Well, not any longer. It's now a big, big machine. It also is bigger in terms of population, obviously, and richer, with India, 1.4 billion people, and it's richer than the EU. There is even the smaller Anglo-zone, those nations which are basically Anglo-Saxons, and they are Britain, America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Put them all together, bigger and richer than the EU. And they're all gagging to trade with us. And as for Europe suddenly saying, we don't want to trade with you anymore. Come along. This is a block of nations with a 25 billion a year annual profit from the British account. Do you think Mercedes is going to say, we don't want to send you any more cars? Can you imagine what would happen if the German Chancellor banned the export of German cars, Volkswagens, Audis, BMWs, Mercedes, Porsche to this country? They'd have to give protective redundancy notice to 500,000 German craftsmen. How do you go to those car bosses and say, would you care to subsidize my party for me the next election? No, not going to happen. Trade will go on. We will remain in the single market, which frankly is the only benefit left that we have. It won't go away, and we will not leave it. But we will have the opportunity to talk to Brazil without asking permission, to talk to China without asking permission, to go back and talk to our Australian and New Zealand friends, our Canadians, still loyal to us, still dying to trade with us. We won't need to ask permission. And that's what I'd like to see us leave. We will be told there are risks. I'm going to mention risks. I've seen a few. And I've seen this country take on a few. But the ones I didn't see was when off the coast of Spain, it was very, very risky to take on the combined Spanish and French fleet. But our commander at the time decided to do that. The result was that the Royal Navy ruled the waves and occasionally waived the rules for the next 150 years. It was risky to take on a superior force in a village just south of Brussels. But our then commander decided he would do that, and he won. The result was that Britain became the most influential country in Europe for 100 years. from 1815 to 1914. And it was incredibly risky in 1940 to take on the mass, the might of the power across the Channel. Now, I was a curly-haired and uncomprehending, bewildered little boy in a garden in Ashford, staring up at a little silver fish above my head, not knowing that I was watching Hurricanes and Spitfires fighting and eventually winning the Battle of Britain. As a result of taking that risk, we kept our sovereignty for another 50 years, from 45 to 95, 193 actually, the Maastricht Treaty took most of it away. I believe that the referendum could be as big a game changer as any of those. We won't need a ship of the line. We won't need a cavalry charge. We won't even need a Spitfire. We won't really need anything but a negotiating room and some bright brains. And yet I think that the outcome could put the dice stamp on this country and its future for the next 30 or 40 years, a generation. I won't be here. You lads will. Make a good job of it, won't you? Thank you.